Hi, I'm Sylvia and welcome to my channel. Today I'm speaking about a few indicators that can show a future pregnancy. Or if you have been planning or you are planning to get pregnant, then you can follow these indicators. And I'm going to speak about Jupiter because Jupiter is basically the most fertile planet in astrology, and this is because it is a warm and moist planet. And we also need to take into consideration the moon because the moon is another very fertile planet in astrology, and the moon actually rules over menstrual cycles but also over motherhood. We also need to look at the fifth house in your birth chart, and that's because your fifth house basically rules over children. We also need to look at the first house, and that's because the first house rules your body. And we need to look at the eighth house, because the eighth house rules over conception. And we also need to take a look at transiting North Node, because wherever the North Node goes in our birth chart, it always indicates fated events or destined event. It's like a meeting with our destiny, basically. I'm going to start with transits. So the first thing that we need to look at is transiting Jupiter. Where is Jupiter transiting in your birth chart? Now, if Jupiter is transiting your fifth house, this means that there is a high chance for you to fall pregnant and to bring a new child into your life. And that's also because Jupiter represents opportunities and blessings. So if you have been wanting to have children, Jupiter transiting your fifth house can be very beneficial for you. Then we need to take a look to see whether Jupiter is transiting your first house. And this is because during this period of time when Jupiter is transiting your first house, you can be more fertile than usual. And then we also need to take a look at transiting Jupiter in the eighth house. And that's because, like I mentioned before, the eighth house rules over conception. So Jupiter transiting your eighth house can mean that there are opportunities for you to fall pregnant. And I haven't spoken much actually about the fourth house, but Jupiter transiting the fourth house can also bring a new child into your life or falling pregnant, because the fourth house also rules over motherhood. And when Jupiter transits your fourth house, can mean that you can expand your family. Now, we also need to take a look to see if transiting Jupiter makes an aspect, especially conjunction, trine, or sextile to your moon. And that's because actually, like I said before, both the moon and Jupiter actually are the most fertile planets in astrology. So when they make a positive aspect in transit, it can mean that you can be very fertile during that period of time. And now let's speak about the North Node. So the North Node can be a bit like Jupiter because it can bring opportunities and growth wherever it goes in your birth chart. So if transiting North Node is going through your fifth house, obviously this means that you can fall pregnant. Or if the North Node is transiting your eighth house, again, it can mean that you have higher chances to fall pregnant during this period of time. And now, a very important and useful technique to predict the future in general is progressions, secondary progressions. So if you haven't been using progressions, secondary progressions at all, I highly recommend you do, because they are indeed a very good technique to predict the future. So if you want to predict if you can get or when you can get pregnant, then take a look at your secondary progressions and take a look at your progressed moon. Now, if your progressed moon goes into the sign of Taurus or the sign of Cancer, this again can mean that during this period of time you will actually be very fertile. And this is because both the sign of Taurus and the sign of Cancer are actually the most fertile signs out of all the signs in astrology. And this is because the moon in Cancer is in domicile, and when the moon is in Taurus, it is exalted. So the moon is extremely strong in these two signs. Now you also need to take a look and see whether your progressed moon enters or goes through your fifth house, natal fifth house, or if it's going through your eighth house, natal eighth house. And you also need to take a look at Jupiter, progressed Jupiter. So if your progressed Jupiter goes into your fifth house or eighth house, again, this is a period of time when you can fall pregnant. And the last thing I want to speak about is if your Jupiter, if your progressed Jupiter makes a trine or sextile or a conjunction to the ruler of your fifth house. That's also very powerful. These were a few indicators that can show future pregnancy. And if you like my video or if you like my content, then you can subscribe to my channel and learn more about astrology. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.